Welcome to our dynamic Earth. It's a place, yes, but it's also our planet. It's the place we live. And yes, that may be a bit cheesy, but I don't care, because it is our dynamic Earth, and we do have a responsibility, a lot of which you'll hear about today. But it's not only about responsibility. It's about what we do at an individual level, at a business level, and at a societal level to keep things moving in the right direction. I'll explain more about that in just a second. My name is John Curtis. I'm chair of the Net Zero Group. I'm chair for today. And my role here is very simple. It's to keep this lot in order. That's be here on time, kindly speak for your allotted amount of time, and get off when you're finished. And if I get that done, and I get us all away from here by 4 o'clock, I'm a happy man. It is my background to follow rules. I'm a lawyer by training, so I apologise for that up front. I'm a journalist by accident, and I work for the BBC and Channel 4. I've done Grand Designs Live, I've done Countryfile Live, and so on. I host main stages. This is what I do, but it's all around sustainability, because that matters. And so I'm an environmentalist by choice. Some domestics, mobile phones, please put them on stun. I know we say this at every conference, but we're 2 years out of practice now. So please put them on stun. It is very, very frustrating when you're a speaker up here. You've got everything going, the juices are going, the heart's going, and somebody's phone goes off. If there's a fire alarm, there's no drill planned for today, but if there is one, big green signs, 3 of them, up at the back, follow me. I'll be the first one out the door. Breaks, we have them at 11:20, at 1 o'clock, and at 15:50. That's 10 to 4 in old money. And finally, COVID. The law says that if we are moving around in this building, we should wear our masks. And I'd kindly ask you to observe that, especially seeing as we've got a minister here. If you are eating, drinking, sat down, you are welcome to remove them. But whatever you do, it is your choice, and that's okay. So do what you feel is right. For me, when I'm moving around, it's mask. Hugging, handshaking, whatever you choose to do, all down to personal choice. And I know that's awkward, but if it's elbow bumps or fist pumps or feet or whatever it might be, do what you are comfortable with. We have a live stream, which is happening today. So we are being beamed? Beamed is the right word. We are being beamed right the way around the world today. People are watching from all over. It is important that we represent Scotland and the wonderful things that we do here. There will be time for questions and answers, and I'm hoping that all of our panel will be able to stay for the Q&A session towards the end of this morning's session. And now, a bit of preamble before our first speaker. The 23rd of March 2020 was a day that I will never forget, because it was a day that kicked our ass. It was a day that said, hello, I'm Mother Nature, and I'm coming to get you. Its name was COVID. And things that we do now, we would never have dreamt of. I came through from Falkirk this morning to Edinburgh on a train. It was an empty train. I did that journey for 10 years when I worked at the Scottish Government. And not a day went by when I didn't get a seat. Now I can have as many as I want. The world has changed. So the question has to be, are the rumours of net zero really greatly exaggerated? Are the rumours of net zero being dead greatly exaggerated? Do they matter? Does anybody care? We have coronavirus. We have wars. We have people dying of hunger and thirst. Does this really matter? Ask you a question. What are we fighting for? Why are we fighting the virus? Why are we fighting enemies? Why are we battling? And why then does net zero matter? It matters because we need a world for our kids to inherit, a world that is better than the world we have today. And surely, doing the right thing in all of those circumstances is what we do as human beings. We want to do the right thing. Net zero is one of those right things, in my humble opinion. It takes focus, it takes funding, it takes innovation, but most of all, it takes will. It takes your will. It takes our will. And I guess ultimately, we will. The Net Zero Club is something I mentioned. It's a networking group which will help us to work collaboratively because none of us have the answers. None of us have all of the answers. We all have a part to play. We are a jigsaw that can move us towards net zero. But we need the funding, the policy framework, the certainty, the direction of travel, and the will to make it all work. Somebody who knows more about the policy than probably anybody else in the Scottish Government is Richard Lochhead, MSP, Scottish Government Minister for Just Transition, Employment and Fair Work. He has worked as Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs, Food and Environment, and Minister for Further Education, Higher Education and Science. There are few who have had briefs that cover so much of what is relevant to our mission to reach net zero. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Richard Lochhead.
Thanks very much, John. Good morning, everyone. It's really nice to join you all here today. And I'm now very, very nervous because John's just said I know more about net zero policies than anyone else in the Scottish Government, which I wish was the case, but I'll try and live up to part of that expectation as the morning progresses. And it is really nice to join you all in person. As a minister for many, many years, I've been used to speaking to people in conferences and speaking at events, and of course that all dried up for the last couple of years. This is one of my first 2 or 3 events getting back into the swing of things, so it's nice to see everyone in person this morning. And of course, I'm going to have to try and teach myself not to pause and check Twitter for a couple of minutes, because I have to tell myself I can't switch the camera off. I'm in front of you and you'll all be looking at me. So it's good to get back into the swing of things again. I look forward to meeting people as the breaks happen and the morning progresses. I'm with you for the first part of the day. I had a quick look at some of the exhibitions upstairs, and net zero dentistry, I'd never heard of that before, so I look forward to finding out more about that. But the idea of zero visits to the dentist is something I find very attractive. But it just shows you how everyone's engaging in this agenda at the moment. So there's a lot for me to learn at events like this taking place this morning. And of course, I'm not the only minister attending. You have Jenny Gilruth, the Minister for Transport, the relatively new Minister for Transport, who will be with you all this afternoon to speak about her portfolio, which of course is a huge issue in terms of the net zero agenda as well. So I just want to start by saying that today's net zero conference themes, which are your commitment to national net zero by 2045, the need for accelerated action, talking also about the theme of the huge economic and job opportunities provided by innovation and the need for collaboration by public, private and voluntary sectors, are all themes which are crucially important in this day and age, and have never been more important, as John said in his opening remarks. That's also partly because the Scottish Government does recognise that this is a time of acute global crisis for the climate, the environment, biodiversity loss, health and the economy. It's also a crisis for security in other ways as well, because of course we do meet against the backdrop of the horrific war, and we should take a minute to say again that Scotland stands in resolute solidarity with the Ukrainian people. And of course, as you are all aware, the Scottish Government is committed to playing our full part in the global humanitarian effort and in offering a warm response to those who want to seek sanctuary in our own country here in Scotland as well. And I do hope as I'm sure we all do, that as some more talks kick off today in Turkey, that they make progress despite all the enormous challenges that they face. I also want to pay tribute to all of you for all of your commitment and hard work across the public sector and in our local authorities, the NHS, education, business and industry, and of course the voluntary sector, in supporting the public throughout the pandemic that John referred to as well, whilst also helping at the same time to ensure that Scotland can continue to make progress on cutting our emissions and strengthening our climate resilience. So today is an opportunity for me as a Minister to just thank all of you for your hard work and leadership in those agendas. And I want to take a few moments to share with you Scotland's achievements, which you've helped to deliver, also to stress how important the public sector is, and also to set out for you all why we are placing a just transition at the heart of our climate policy. And I am, of course, the Minister for Just Transition, Scotland's first Minister for Just Transition, so I've got responsibility for that, albeit not the whole net zero policy. There's lots of other Cabinet Secretaries and Ministers who've got a role to play as well. I also want to stress that the Scottish Government is deeply grateful for all your strong contributions to the successful staging of COP26 last year. And of course, it's very appropriate to say that when we've got with us today Councillor Susan Aitken, the leader of Glasgow City Council, who played such an important personal role at COP26 and helped make it such a success for this country, but hopefully make progress for the whole of the planet, of course, at the same time, because it was a truly historic event for Glasgow and Scotland, and it did demonstrate the impact that Scotland can have on the international stage. We successfully championed our themes of just transition and people, and the importance of states and regions and cities, and climate justice for the Global South at COP26. That was the kind of priorities that the Scottish Government and Scotland had. And crucially, the Glasgow Climate Pact that resulted has kept alive the United Nations goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. But to deliver that 1.5 degrees goal, emissions here and abroad must be halved by 2030. So it's a crucial few years that lie ahead. We can and we must build on the great progress that you have already helped make here in Scotland. And we have already halved, of course, our emissions since 1990, decarbonising more quickly than any other G20 nation. And almost 100% of our gross electricity consumption is now from renewables as we speak and meet here today. So that's a great milestone to achieve as well. And we are investing heavily in tackling fuel poverty, improving energy efficiency, decarbonising heat, and in sustainable public transport. So we're also at the forefront, the international forefront, of tackling biodiversity loss and funding peatland restoration and woodland creation as well. And we're leading the world on how to deliver a green recovery and a just transition to a low-carbon economy in which nobody is left behind. And Scotland's public sector has a key role to play in continuing its leadership in the shared national endeavour to tackle this global climate emergency. And the commitment by our public bodies in Scotland is very clear. All 32 local authorities have signed Scotland's Climate Change Declaration, been doing that as far back as 2007. Many local authorities have declared a climate emergency and already set ambitious targets, including our two biggest cities, targeting net zero on area-wide emissions by 2030. And of course, we're delighted to see places like my home council of Moray aiming to become net zero in the council's own emissions by 2030 as well. NHS Scotland's dedicated network of sustainability champions has also cut emissions from its buildings by 64% since 1990, and its £10 billion new programme of new hospitals and health facilities will be governed by its newly strengthened commitment to net zero by 2040, which has the strong support of the NHS leadership. And if you look at Scottish Water and Scotland's colleges, they're also targeting net zero by 2040. Indeed, in terms of the education estate, we've got a £2 billion learning estate investment programme, which the Scottish Government's put in place in partnership with our local authorities to deliver digitally enabled low-carbon schools and campuses. And with the Scottish Green Party, we've also pledged to decarbonise heat for public buildings by 2038, and we're supporting this with at least £200 million to decarbonise the public sector estate. We're also working hard on leveraging Scotland's annual £13 billion of public procurement into the green recovery, and we can only deliver that again in partnership with our private sector supply chain. And emissions from heating public buildings are a third lower than 1990, and emissions from public bodies' electricity use has halved since mandatory climate change annual reporting began back in 2015-16. And other areas like Transport Scotland, they're also supporting the decarbonisation of the public sector fleet. And of course, the General Ruth, I'm sure we'll see more about that later on. And public bodies are also playing a crucial role in delivering our climate change adaptation programme. And for those public bodies who have not yet set their net zero targets, 2022 is an important year. Newly strengthened climate legislation requires Scottish public bodies to report by November target dates for achieving net zero direct emissions and targets for reducing indirect emissions as well. And working with our partners, the Sustainable Scotland Network, we'll be running an event on the 25th of May to provide further support to public bodies for this year's reports. So quite clearly, the public sector is absolutely fundamental to the delivery of national and local climate ambitions on emission cuts, and is quite clearly at the forefront of a response to the impacts of climate change. Public sector leaders have to be asking the climate and sustainability question at every decision they take, embedding climate action in their corporate governance and integrating it fully in the delivery of our public services in Scotland. And innovation and collaboration will be key to our success. Challenges of pace and skills and finance are undoubtedly huge and they lie ahead, but we have to do our best to rise to all of these challenges. And our public sector focus now has to be in leadership, action and delivering on our climate ambitions. Now, turning to just transition, which I can speak about for ages, but I want to talk about that because that's my kind of speciality at the moment. The Scottish Government is placing just transition at the heart of our climate policy. I've been attending dozens of meetings over the last few weeks across Scotland to push the Just Transition agenda, and also we have the new £500 million Just Transition Fund for North East Scotland, Moray, which I'm working on just now as well, which will be in place for the next 10 years. So people quite often ask me, what's Just Transition, what does it mean? And what I say really is, look at it through two prisms. Firstly, it's about creating good green jobs in Scotland to make sure people have good work and good jobs in the economy going forward through the economic transformation. And the second prism I say to people, to keep it simple to look through, is that as we go through this economic transformation, let's learn mistakes from the past and not repeat them. Let's manage the process, and let's not leave folk behind or communities behind. And let's use this as a platform for tackling inequalities. If we're going to rebuild our economy going forward, let's make sure we get it right. So that kind of prism of tackling inequalities, not leaving people behind, is the second way we should look at the Just Transition agenda. And it really matters to the entire country, the Just Transition agenda. It's all about jobs, it's all about people, it's about energy, it's about farming, retail, construction, and so on. So we're entering a really exciting period for the nation, and many people are already seeing the benefits from being at the forefront of net zero transition. I saw just at the end of last year that PricewaterhouseCoopers released a report that placed Scotland as a top performer in the UK in terms of green jobs creation, for instance. And from climate-savvy gin production in St Boswell's to sustainable food packaging made from seaweed and Oban, in the past few months, alone Scotland has seen private investment being announced and proposed to accelerate the net zero economy in all kinds of areas of our economy. And that's going to create hundreds of thousands of green jobs across the country in the next few years. We're trying to accelerate through Scottish Government policies. We've got our Green Jobs Fund, which has already seen nearly £17 million awarded to 56 projects, which will create nearly 6,000 full-time equivalent jobs to be created or safeguarded from that investment alone. But we will only deliver a just transition if it's a truly national endeavour, with everyone playing their part. And yesterday in Aberdeen, I met some community organisations to talk about how we can make sure this is grassroots. It's not just about big companies and central government or local government and agencies. It's about grassroots. It's about having a just transition in every town, village, community in Scotland, as well as in terms of big players in the economy. So we have to get that right as well. So that's why we're taking an approach that the just transition will be co-designed. It's ultimately people who live with the change who've got to have a voice in shaping the change going forwards. And a key way to do that is what we're doing with the Just Transition in Scotland, which is creating Just Transition plans for every sector, region and all sites in Scotland as well. So we published a unique national just transition planning framework in Scotland, which set out how we approach this in a consistent manner. And it was great at COP26. All the other countries were wanting me to, quite a lot of them were wanting me to attend panel sessions and speak to them about what's happening in Scotland with the just transition. The rest of the world's looking at Scotland about how to get this right. So we've got a big onus to try and lead the way and be a first mover in terms of just transition in Scotland. So our first just transition plan is going to be for the energy sector, and that will amplify the voices of those most impacted by the transition and set out how changes in the decade ahead will be fair for everyone. It will establish very much a shared vision for Scotland's energy system and identify the concrete steps we have to take going forward to manage the economic and social impacts of the transition fairly. So it's a really vital piece of work, and it's got to be relevant to people whether they live in a rural household or whether they are part of the oil and gas sector in Aberdeen or whatever, or whether you're a young person in the Central Belt wondering what it all means for you as well. Now, the public sector is home to key partners in developing and delivering the just transition agenda, be it the education institutions doing research and training up the next generation of green workers, or our enterprise agencies supporting emerging green businesses, or local authorities who, of course, have got a crucial role to play in this as well. They've all got the expertise to help us design and deliver the solutions needed to make this a truly inclusive transition. And you also have the networks to help facilitate broad engagement on this important topic. So last year we launched, of course, our renewed Just Transition Commission to advise and scrutinise our efforts to produce all of these Just Transition plans. And that commission will engage with those most likely to be impacted by the transition, and, as necessary, with other sources of expertise to make sure we're well informed going forward, because we are learning as we go. No one has done this before. So it's going to take, no doubt, a few years to get this right, but it's so important for the next few decades to get to our targets in a fair way and for future generations. So the voices of industry, communities, trade unions, everyone has to be at the heart of this process. And we've reappointed the internationally renowned climate change expert and co-chair of the UN's IPCC, Professor Jim Skia, who's a Scot, who has been reappointed as chair of the Just Transition Commission. So that will produce an annual State of the Nation report, I'm sure, and it will hold us to account. And likewise, every year we'll have to make a statement of what we're doing in terms of taking the just transition forward. So as I go towards a conclusion, and hopefully stick to my 12 or 13 minutes I was given, I just want to say that Scotland's public bodies, alongside the third and private sectors, have such a crucial role to play. All of you in your different areas of life and workplaces and occupations, whatever your role is, you individually have got a crucial role to play as well, and to take the message out there in terms of all the work that's got to be undertaken to make sure we have a just transition but get to our net zero targets as well. So I just want to finish just by saying that Scotland's going to look very, very differently in the next few years. Actually, I just came from visiting the National Grid Control Centre in Wokingham, where I was last week. And of course, you've got the big electronic grid on the wall of where all the energy is coming from in the UK and how it's being produced and its sources. It's already radically different to where it was a few years ago. It's phenomenal to see it and then think about what it all means. And Scotland's opportunity to produce electricity many more times than what we actually need as a country is a massive opportunity to transform our economy, make it one of the best economies in the world, and that's not just my view, that's their view, one of the top few economies in the world. Just think of that in terms of decarbonised economies, to give people a decent quality of life, decarbonise Scotland, and make Scotland a better country, but more importantly, in terms of today's agenda, to make sure we're contributing towards a global effort to save the planet and get to net zero by 2045. Thank you very much. Thank you.